For Season 11, I've decided to cover only one region, NA because it's where I live, and only one team, based on YouTube comments, and then after taking those NA teams that were mentioned, using a Twitter poll to decide the team to follow, which just so happened to be Spacestation Gaming. This is Playday number 1, match between DarkZero and our new favorite team, Spacestation. DarkZero will ban Habana, which is the normal hard breacher that teams bring, because you can impact trick pretty easily on Villa, and that disables breaching with Thermite. Spacestation will ban Dokkaebi, and if you've never been called on Villa, then let me tell you, Dokkaebi is extremely powerful. You can almost pinpoint exactly where a player is. I'm actually surprised that more teams don't bring Dokkaebi, just because of how good she is on this map. Then Spacestation will ban Mira. I actually don't think, and I've said this before, I don't think Mira's that strong on this map, although I did see the other day a clip of Reciprocity use Mira in a very interesting way. We kind of have to hurry up these bans, but last one's Echo, and we've talked about Echo in the past, how he's a strong plant denial operator. So let's look at the operators. The important thing for us to remember is that Goyo and Amaru are enabled in Season 11. The casters have mentioned this quite a bit. And so in terms of what SSG is bringing, we're bringing the hard breacher. Thatcher makes that a little easier. And then we have Zofia because she brings tons of utility in the lifeline, as well as breaching charges, as well as some form of nades and sledge. I actually think Buck is a bit stronger on Villa because he can buck over the walls, and also because of how the entire floor is soft, it's very easy to walk into a C4 as sledge, since you have to be directly above the point that you're breaching. And then Jackal, and I will briefly have my little tirade on Jackal. I don't think Jackal's very strong, especially on Villa, because there's a basement. And the basement allows roamers to retreat into the depths of the building without you necessarily being able to actually pinch and kill the roamer. So a lot of the times, I think, even on Bank, for instance, you will scan someone on the second floor, and then you'll come to realize that they're actually in the basement on site. And then you'll scan the rest of the building, and you'll realize that there's actually no roamers, which is great because that's tons of intel. But it's kind of like he does the same thing as what a drone can do. But so Jackal would indicate that SSG is expecting DZ to roam in a bigger way. On the defense, we have the intel denial and Mozzie. Legion, what Legion allows a player to do is control an area by himself because he has active intel in the form of the goo mines. There's the smoke. An interesting thing about how this new season came is it removed smoke's impact grenades for a deployable shield. So we see a lot more deployable shields from the smoke rather than barbed wire, but what smoke lost is the ability to impact trick inside sight, which is often what the smoke player would do. So it'll be interesting to see if it's Legion instead who has impact grenades that will impact the wall. Jaeger is just a default pick, and then Pulse. Pulse is very strong because of those soft floors. So what happens here is Goyo is 6th from smoke. SSG has the utility, that is the Zofia and the sledge, to remove 3 of the 3 Goyo shields, or really 4 of the 3 Goyo shields. But that also means that those players won't be able to use, for instance, one impact launcher or one nade, depending on how they do that. Of course, removing the Goyo shields vertically is an alternative that doesn't expend any utility. On a dining and kitchen defense, they will reinforce the laundry wall. The left side memorial wall, this actually allows you to have an angle from cage or bicycle storage, but they don't have any hard breach denial, so it doesn't really matter because no one will be actually tricking that wall. The wall on memorial here is soft, so what they will do is they will barricade the hallway doors, it gives the team a notification when they're starting to punch through Memorial. What I see is a great vulnerability here, looking in from the hallway all the way into dining room. Reinforcement on China, reinforcement on pantry. There is barbed wire on the laundry door and a Vulcan shield facing what I like to call lamp, because of this lamp right here. But there's a Vulcan shield there in order to stop a somewhat default plant towards lamp. And that is all on the first floor. If we look at the second floor, they will reinforce the triple wall of statue and master. To reinforce the position they have here, they'll put a Goyo shield or Vulcan shield in the statuary door, a Vulcan shield in the master bathroom. Again, this is to impede movement, restrict movement, and it makes getting a vertical kill either through C4 or soft destruction all the more easier. Barbed wire on the back of astronomy. This will be very relevant later in the game, or actually early in the game, and then a rotation through Astro. And that allows players to move, obviously, between Astro Trophy and split, even out of statuary if needed. So I want to quickly turn your attention to this guy right here. This is a drone from Canadian, and what he's currently doing is he's actively droning Fultz up through the basement of Villa. Fultz is doing something that's becoming a little more and more meta in Siege and Pro League, which is trying to get entry kills on roamers underneath. These are typically the players that are unsupported. But normally, I mean, at least in my experience, what I've seen is in past seasons, I think the meta tended towards holding rotates outside. But more recently, teams like Luminosity Gaming comes to mind, and also Vodafone Giants, now Rogue, obviously. They've been getting more aggressive in pushing inside. So here we go. Fultz is at the bottom of astronomy stairs. The expectation is that a player, a defender, will rotate through this pathway at some point in the round. And Fultz is here to catch that and get the opening kill. His team is pushing through the master and study side, or sorry, just the master side. So Jaeger, pressured from astronomy, is rotating down. I think he's actually caught on a reload animation. The problem here is Fultz. So Fultz gets the opening kill. Awesome. The problem is twofold. Number one, Fultz hasn't used any of his utility, and Goyo being here is a concern, especially with the impact launcher. The second thing is, I believe Fultz is moving out of a position or into a more aggressive position without any intel to support it. Rather, what I think the play would have been is, since he knows that his team is pushing from this master side, he should have rotated up Astro stairs in order to pinch with his teammates, or at least have the support of his teammates there. He's moving into territory that is completely uncharted. Opening kill, heavily favored in the defenders because Jaeger's already put down all of his utility, whereas Zofia hasn't used any of hers. And normally you think that opening kills are actually an indicator of who's going to win, but based on the utility trade there, I think that DarkZero is in a better position. Rampy's getting to work vertically here. They haven't needed to expend any utility to remove that Goyo shield that was on statue door. I'm not sure how they were able to do that without most likely a defender bursting the shield in order to rotate. It was probably Jaeger who bursted his shield in order to rotate down astronomy stairs. But here we go. So Sledge created a bunch of vertical holes, and Bosco is now peeking down those vertical holes. What happens is Eclipse on the Mozzie either guesses it, or based on the pulse, nets a kill vertically. And it looks like it was probably informed by the pulse based on Canadian still being on that cardiac sensor. I thought this was somewhat interesting. At first I thought it was a mistake that Canadian was making. So you can see here Canadian's dry peeking all of this. and that's why Eclipse gets a kill on Canadian. But it really looks like there was some kind of communication between the sledge and the thermite, that is Canadian, in order to pinch the player in Memorial, because this refrag is almost immediate and they really do have him trapped in this position. So the round flew by for me. We have a player upstairs who probably should be downstairs supporting the plant directly. If someone flanks vertically, there's really nothing you can do. But more likely than not, you need to worry about the players horizontally. That is this Legion and the Pulse, in order for this plant to ever get down. I actually think the play there would have just been to push for the kills deep in sight together. SSG attempts a plant and it doesn't work out. Aviator in games, DZ's focusing more on intel here with the Valkyrie and Maestro. We also have Cade, who can Cade the walls on Aviator in games. One important thing to note is that along with Smoke, Cade lost his impact grenades. So now he has C4 and barbed wire. What that means is the lineup that DZ is showing, Maestro would have to bring the impact nades in order for them to be able to impact trick Aviator in games. So with the Thatcher, SSG should be able to open up a wall if Maestro doesn't have those impact grenades. Same lineup from SSG. On Aviator in games, we have the default study reinforcements. That's that kind of L-shaped quad wall. Reinforcement in vault, and then a reinforcement towards the north end of games room, as well as a rotation between Aviator. I think there's a smaller rotation too, closer to the vault. But interesting feature is the rotation that they have from Classical Hall into games. I believe this is supported with a deployable shield. Let me draw that blue. Deployable shield in Classical Hall. Basically, a player can play in this position and peek aggressively onto the main stairs, and also somewhat swing onto a player pushing through this kind of study hallway, if you will. Reinforcements on the master wall into statuary. The idea behind reinforcing these three walls instead of reinforcing, say, the 90 wall or the Classical Hall walls of sight is really to expend a thermite charge should a team push through the master side, which is a very common push. The reason why it's so common is because in Siege it's very beneficial to attain as much map control as quickly as possible. And what you will come to realize about Villa, if you watch a lot of Pro League, is a lot of times, or kind of the default hold, is to stick to this area here and neglect defensively the area above. So if attackers can take that map control quickly and establish themselves there, normally it works out in their favor. Of course, SSG is going to elect not to push from the master side and instead directly push into study, which is somewhat pushing into the counter strategy, depending on whether it's a straight push into Aviator or if they're actually going to move into Classical Hall. There is a repel line of sight that is created from the 90 repel because they haven't reinforced, that is DarkZero, hasn't reinforced the games room wall. And so establishing a player on that 90 repel would be really strong, but we'll actually see that SSG is not going to do that. And again, focus really within study. They actually take a really early gamble on something, which we'll cover in just a second, and I might as well skip to cover. Eclipse is throwing one of my favorite Valcams on Villa, and it's on these chandeliers. It's very difficult to spot, but provides tons of intel, especially on a high traffic area like that red spot. So once again, all Eclipse did there was throw Valcam on this chandelier. We're going to see that Rampy is cooking a grenade on main entrance. What he's doing is he's removing the deployable shield vertically from underneath with that grenade in Classical Hall. So rather than having to fidget with any of the ADSs, he just nades that and he's good. Actually looks like he didn't get the deployable shield though, and didn't even throw the nade either. Instead, so this is the play I was referring to earlier. And we're going to dive into this a little deeper. So let's let it play out one more time. Zofia and Sledge are pushing from study into maps, which is that aviator door here. And then they both get slammed by this Cade. There are two things that should be noted. And probably the most important is the fact that Cade is at very low HP. And then Zofia, through what we were just watching for that POV, never even turned to Cade. So this is why this broke down. I actually like the call a lot from SSG. They just did it incorrectly. And what should preface all of this is Canadian has a drone initially in study. Most likely what he did is he droned the area from here into vault and knew that no one was vault. So it's Zofia's responsibility to cover the door towards landing, and it's Sledge's responsibility to cover the rotate in sight. The problem is this, and I think it's easier if we draw this out on the map. So the problem is this. Let's have the yellow color be Zofia and the blue color be Sledge. Zofia is responsible for holding this door, and Sledge is responsible for holding the rotate in sight. Well, Cade, who we're going to draw as red, is somewhat behind the couch in Aviator, and is holding the door of Aviator. So who does Cade see first? Cade sees Zofia first, who he kills, and then sees Sledge. If Sledge had entered in first, or if it was Zofia's responsibility to cover the rotate in Aviator, this whole play might have gone differently. In fact, it's really impressive that Sledge nearly killed Cade, given the fact that he was last in, and that basically means that Cade's crosshair was already trained on study door. So that was the mistake that these guys made. Unfortunately for Spacestation Gaming, you didn't use a single nade, you didn't use a single Zofia concussion grenade or impact. So again, you are utility starved. There is a very low chance that you're going to be able to win this based on the utility game, based on economy of utility. Cade's attempting to trick the wall. What happens is, because Thinking Nade uses all three, they're unable to remove these evil eyes. At this point, those evil eyes are strongest as intel, because unless Maestro opens up the evil eyes and tries to zap a player, then they're not going to be removed. And having that permanent intel, watching, we just saw one on top of Brown Stairs, having that permanent intel is going to be extremely beneficial to the defense, since they'll know exactly where the attackers are, especially given that they've fully committed to a study push. Regardless, Thermite is able to breach open the wall here into sight, and that applies a ton of pressure because, well, obviously, but because now the defenders have an additional hole to worry about. So Thinking Nade, nice shot there, trying to bring this game back from the dead. Bosco's just holding a long angle into the hallway. The defenders are getting a little too aggressive here. They really need to play more passively because they have the man advantage. Especially with Cade so hurt. 45 seconds left, and Smoke's actually out of all gas canisters. So it's looking a little dire. That's the first Jackal track 2 from Bosco. Bosco, by the way, is just such a flexible player. He's able to play so many different operators and play them so well. This is a really great game from Bosco, actually. But the thing is, you're using your ability 40 seconds into the round. So again, I don't know why Eclipse feels the need to, or the Valkyrie, I want to refer as little to the players as much as possible, but Valkyrie is peeking out into study, and again, very aggressive. I know that they have permanent intel in study, that Maestro cam, that allows them to make plays like that, but you don't need a play here. So Bosco gets the kill onto the Smoke. The Smoke was behind the bar that's indestructible. That probably means the smoke just peaked again. And that was kind of a great round to show how we took a 3v5 in terms of SSG being the 3, all the way down to 1v1. It was only the Cade who repositioned from Vault into Aviator that was really able to salvage what almost looked like was going to be a round throne. So good job to Mint for, first of all, stopping the somewhat rush into sight, and then also for playing his life so passively, because at the end of it, it really mattered. We're on to living room and library. DZ has been choosing a lot of off-site sites through this matchup. I don't know if it's because, SSG is coming into this being one of the hottest teams in NA. They just won the Invitational Quals, USN. Something else. Their OGA pit performance was great too. That's what I was thinking of. But it's interesting that DarkZero is choosing so many off-meta sites. I know DarkZero typically will do more experimental things, but we'll actually see SSG will do the same thing. So maybe Villa's being more understood or something. I don't know. False is going to 6 from the Ashe to the Zofia. We're keeping the Jackal. The difference between Ashe and Zofia might seem as though there is none, but it's actually really nuanced. Like, Ashe can burn 2 ADSs and then use her launcher in order to get rid of utility, whereas if Zofia tried doing the same thing, she would actually run out of all the utility. She would burn the 2 ADSs but not be able to remove a deployable shield, for instance, or castle barricade, whatever. But also, Ashe has a better gun, has more mobility, gives you just a little more fragging power, so they want to give Faults that. And with a 0-2 deficit, why not give a player some more fragging potential? DZ is sticking with a hard drone denial and anti-breach, and the Mozzie and Mute and the Cade. We have the Legion, who is going to act somewhat as intel as well as castle. Both of these operators bring utility that notifies, Mute too. Not Mute, but Mozzie, because there's no points, so Mute doesn't give you an indicator. But Mozzie, Castle, Legion will all somewhat trigger a notification for the defenders that, hey, there's a player in this vicinity, there's a player droning in this area. So that's why we see that's why DarkZero can get away with the lack of intel. Reinforcements, we have once again the study wall. Again, this is a defense on the floor below it. Reinforcement on vault, and then the same game's wall reinforced. What I see a lot of teams, and a strong weakness of this kind of setup, is this angle that you get from classical hall. If you Ashe or Zofia / whatever into here, you basically expose all of the players that are in games, and you can even cut them out of rotating from Vault into Aviator. So that's really strong to open up and requires really kind of the minimal utility in terms of soft breach versus hard breach. But then utility, or rather a castle barricade here on Aviator door, which means that the defenders don't have to worry so much about a push from landing. On the floor below it, we have, and these are just the reinforcements and the utility that I saw set up at the beginning of, or during the prep phase. There's a rotation from gallery into living, and then a rotation library into the main hallway. This rotation here enables the defenders to retake into site. It's very common for attacking teams to try to go for a plant on the X that I just drew there. Reinforcements on the living room wall, all 3 of them. I actually was quite surprised that all 3 would be reinforced. If this is a retake strategy, then it's very common for there to be a rotation that I drew. The reason why you don't want it to be on, say, this side is because then attackers have a very deep and very powerful angle from the top of the stairs into sight. So you don't want to enable an attacker to use that against you, which is why it's safer to have a rotate on the side. Or it's better to have a rotate not on the horizontal of a staircase. But there is no rotate. And then lastly, there's a reinforcement on piano room. This allows a player to return through the hallway a little safer, because otherwise attackers can have lines of sight from art studio looking all the way down the hallway, which is not advantageous for a player that most likely has hollow versus ACOG. But really it doesn't even matter, because if you have hollow, you can still see the same thing as you can see with ACOG. It's just how clearly you can see it. Anyway, let's get into the round. A jammer on vault. I did notice that while I was watching the prep phase, but I'll call it out right now. And then a jammer on aviator, or sorry, games door, and a barricade. And that's just to make it more difficult for the attackers to discover where it exactly is that these roamers are playing. Vertical holes above in order to support the players on site, very important. If you don't have vertical holes looking down into sight, then it's typically easy, or it enables attackers to rush into sight. Those vertical holes are really the only way to support players on site. It's also a way to deny plant if the attackers take sight. Definitely respect vertical pressure as an attacker. I believe that nade is to clear utility, because I don't actually think he would have known that a player was playing near the door, but it was. I don't think that... I would be surprised if SSG didn't dedicate utility to making it difficult for them to drone into that door. And that's the maps door, the study door. So Thermite wants to breach the aviator wall in order to, or it looks like actually the games wall, in order to apply pressure onto these roamers in the site. Once the attackers get control above, they can start opening up things vertically, and that helps enable the plant. I mean, it works both ways, right? If it's strong for the defenders to be sitting vertically, then it's strong for attackers to be sitting vertically as well. But that's what Thermite's trying to do there. So this rotate that DZ has so kindly created for SSG really puts Mozzie here in a pickle. Once he's droned out, once he's called out that he's proned, then all Ash has to do is pre-fire that position, and he's kind of a goner. If Mozzie plays in the corner by the billiards table and then holds like a lot deeper line of sight there, or if he has support from the player in vault, then this doesn't end up being a kill for SSG, but neither one of those are true. Mute now is just rotating into vault, but it's too late. A great flash from Ash, another great flash from Ash, and then an easy push. I mean, that's just a great use of utility. Props to Fultz. So in theory, SSG doesn't even need to breach the wall of study, but it looks like they did based on Canadian not having an exothermic charge. Well, that's interesting. So Cade created horizontal lines of sight in piano in order to play in that position and also get lines of sight somewhat into like main entrance, but then also onto sight. And it has support from the Legion as well. He's kind of stuck. He has so much pressure that he created, ironically. And so the attack just kind of collapses on him. We don't get to see a whole lot of the kills. That was an interesting castle barricade. Oh, that's into sight. So this castle barricade here is to prevent a mudroom rush. The problem is they lost the vertical support of their roamers very quickly. Let's actually rewind to at what point that was. So we lose Mute and Mozzie at the 50-second mark, that's actually not terrible. Then I think it really just came down to the fact that their players underneath were so exposed, because that's what the site setup is, right? There's a rotate into the main hallway, and then we have this Cade playing in piano with like all the walls exposed so that he can quote unquote make a play. The problem is that once you don't have the manpower to support the player in this position, then it's really kind of like he's the one in the cage with a bunch of guns looking at him. So anyway, SSG, because they were able to get into games so quickly and remove the roamers, able to win that round. Bosco is going to 6 onto the IQ. Probably not necessary. I'd actually say that Ash wouldn't have been a bad pick because of Goyo, and you already have the Thatcher who would have been able to take care of the Cade otherwise. Actually, based on this lineup, I mean, IQ counter is Pulse, so that's fair too. But the bigger thing is I just don't think that Jackal has done a whole lot for SSG, despite Bosco actually making use of his utility, which we've seen in the past with TSM. Not all players necessarily do that every single time. DarkZero, I think, is bringing virtually the same lineup as their first round when they played in dining room and kitchen. So we're going to see a rehash of that first round, and we'll see if Spacestation Gaming can overcome what happened last time. One thing I want to call out that Fultz is doing here is he's standing on top of the maps. The reason being is the Pulse, or C4 in general. I mean, even this duo of Elysian and Barricade, if you set a C4 underneath and you hear the goo being, not detonating, but the goo being triggered, and then a player punching the Barricade, it's a great way to net a free opening kill with very minimal utility. I mean, really just comes down to the Barricade here, hearing a player punch it, and then a C4. You have a player on red watching or listening for that, that's a kill. But what False is trying to do is he's trying to avoid being a C4 at all while he's droning. And so that's why he's staying on a raised object. A lot of times you'll see players drone in Vault, and they'll do the same thing as an attacker. So Faltz took the map control in Aviator by himself, and looks like he's getting help from someone in 90, and that's Rampy, while the rest of the team pushes into Master in order to breach the wall of Master into Statue. So we have this pinch onto the players that we believe is in Statue. Nice refag there. That would have been called out very well by who died by Rampy. There's Zophing the Astro Stairs so that the players can move into Astronomy and take that control. Not a whole lot of stuff was interesting in between when I cut, or most likely cut, but Thermite was just able to open up the wall from Laundry. Zofia made a rotate into Cage, and actually because she rotated from, or bicycle storage, but I call it Cage, but because she rotated through that kind of trap, this trap, I don't know what to call this trap whatever access, it would be unexpected for a defender to get peeked by the right side of the door. So you would expect a player to vault in through the window and be holding this access here, but with Zofia being on this access, there is a high likeliness that a defender will be thrown off guard if they peek into Fultz. She does need to establish a better position though, or at least an angle, or some kind of angle that she's holding. So I'm going to somewhat crack that up to what I just mentioned earlier, that kill onto Mozzie. False just kind of, False pushed into the hallway, got another kill, which like in theory was enough to enable the plan. Now they have the manpower. They wanted False to rotate over to China Door and then pinch into Kitchen. The problem is that Mint makes a play onto Thinking Nade as he's entering into dining with Thermite. So Thinking Nade is supposed to support the plant. As soon as that happened, it was probably in Fultz's best interest to actually rotate back over to Thermite, because one player planting, one person plant supporting very close to the planter. That doesn't happen, and Fultz actually dies. And so now Thermite's stuck in a 1v2, and he's going to lose it. Can't blame Thermite there. And you can't blame Fultz either. It's just Thinking Nade shouldn't have died. Or, I don't even know if it's fair to say that, but Thinking Nade dying ruined the plan that was originally drafted. This time we're seeing Bosco play the Capitao. I can't believe this is the first time we're mentioning Capitao when Capitao is left unbanned. Capitao can literally flame off the entirety of Aviator. He's such a strong operator, and he brings smokes, and he brings flashes or claymores. Tons of utility. But here he is. DZ is giving us the same lineup for Aviator in games. Nothing looks like it's changed. Even, I think, the same 6. Or maybe there wasn't a 6 like that before. But again, leaning into the Maestro and Valkyrie for intel. So once again, SSG is taking into study. It's their priority to breach the wall. Really early smoke canisters from DarkZero. Very, very early. So Bosco's getting onto the east balcony of study. What that position will allow him to do is to stop the player who's down in Classical Hall, supported by the deployable shield, from being able to peek the players in study. And that will allow Thermite, in theory, to actually breach the wall. So the smoke is just kind of being annoying, using tons of using his utility early, but also wasting SSG's time in a very meaningful manner. I mean, we're at like a minute 20 and they haven't even entered the building yet. Great firebolt from Bosco. I cannot rave enough about Bosco. It's a shame that they lost this game. I'm sure you already noticed it, but Smoke and Maestro are playing together in somewhat of a buddy system here on Brown Stairs. Maestro is responsible for anyone who's pushing up Brown Stairs, which is a huge possibility, but then is getting a bit aggressive on the players in study. If he doesn't do that, then Smoke's position is extremely strong, but now that he's died, Smoke's position is quite weak. And I wouldn't be surprised if Bosco rotates out of the Classical Hall after that. And actually, there's even more layers to this. So Mint has those vertical holes that we just saw that look down onto red stairs. These vertical holes right here look down onto red stairs, brown stairs. And that again would support the Maestro. But at the same time, Mint is responsible for tricking the study wall. So I believe we just saw Thermite breach into study. Study into Aviator, which means that the defenders can only really play in Vault in games now with that pressure into sight. And you will actually notice right now that Smoke is in Vault, so he rotated out of Classical. So because Mint is in a 1v4, he needs to get aggressive. He needs to take a position that's somewhat unexpected. I really like that he didn't just push the diffuser straight there, because he could have definitely made it a 1v3 if Thatcher didn't get some sort of intel, which it seems like he did. Good play, ultimately didn't work out for him. DarkZero is going to reattempt Aviator in games. Most likely will be a different reinforcement strategy, but largely the same operators. So one thing that I want to get back to that I mentioned during the pick phase, or not the pick phase, but the ban phase, is how Goyo or Smoke no longer has impacts. And Habana's banned, which means that you can probably bring a Thermite or a Maverick, but Thermite is very easy to impact trick. And we have yet to see, at least to my knowledge, DarkZero attempt an impact trick. Well, this time around, Mint on Goyo has decided to bring impacts. So hopefully they decided to swap the Cade, who I believe he was playing earlier. Yeah, he was playing last round, for Goyo in order to give Mint the ability to impact trick these study walls, because there's really no reason for study to be breached. That was kind of a great view. I mean, I'm sure I'm beating a dead horse here, but we have Smoke in this position by this desk, and then Maestro in this position on Brown stairs with barbed wire supporting him. And so Maestro holds the stairs, Smoke holds study. And they're using those gas canisters to stop SSG from being able to breach into study early, which applies to the pressure onto site. The deployable shield being on study door, which we just saw a frame a second ago, is kind of interesting. It's maybe a lesson learned from when these two, being Rampy and Fultz, decided to rush into Aviator, but almost immediately it's going to be removed. There should be an ADS that supports that deployable shield, but maybe all they wanted to do was delay time, remove some utility. That was a botched EMP throw, unless he knew that there was a ADS. I mean, actually, that was a good EMP throw because there was indeed an ADS on the door from study into the brownstairs hallway. But more likely than not, that was a botched throw. It actually works out in SSG's favor because the EMP radius of Thatcher is roughly around 5 meters. And would have been able to remove the ADS that would have been on that door from the veranda of Villa. Anyways, tons of utility being expended on both sides. We have the smoke grenades coming, or the gas canisters coming out early, and then SSG just finally got rid of the deployable shield that was on top of Brown. So more likely than not, Maestro and Smoke both rotated into 90 or into site. And so SSG is very quickly taking the control that they can get onto Brown stairs. Rampy is nading over the walls. So this is the reason why I actually think that Buck is a little better than Sledge, because you can open up these walls here. You can also just shoot them, or the defenders can make them for you, which is what is the case. But Rampy is going to nade over and remove any utility that would be underneath. I don't know if he thinks that they have mute or something. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And it's also kind of early for Rampy to be doing that, because I don't think Canadian has yet gotten off the veranda. So if Goyo wants, he can definitely impact trick, which is exactly what we're going to see happen. But actually, instead, so because Rampy used all of his nades and there's no way to kind of guarantee the successful breach, they've decided to thermite breach the floor of the floor here in study, and in patches previous, what that would have done is create a very small hole that you can prone under and look into sight. There would have been like a very small hole here, foot level, that would have been enough to at least get a player out of bar, for instance, if you prone peek them. That doesn't happen. Instead, it only vertically creates soft destruction below. But actually, what ends up happening ultimately is he reattempts the thermite charge. Goyo is not in position to impact trick, and he's able to open up a crouch hole thermite charge. The reason why he placed that crouched is because he wanted to avoid the impacts from removing the thermite charge. But actually, I think even if you try to go crouch, if the player gets a really narrow angle onto the top of the wall, it'll still remove the thermite charge. Anyway, you can kind of see the complexity with breaching into Villa, simply because, well, one, you have two forms of active hard breach denial in Bandit and Cade, and then also you have this other dynamic, which is impact tricking on Villa. Okay, so the attackers have taken control of 90 right into the fact that it's all free. There's tons of soft destruction here. I'm actually a bit upset that Rampy wouldn't open up some more pressure, because he certainly should and could. Oh, but he's pushing from landing. So these 4 attackers attacked from basically every single doorway that there is. Two right now in Classical Hall. You have the Thermite, who's in Study, and that there's a breach now. And then you have Rampy, who was attacking from landing. There's no roamer on DarkZero's side, so the defenders are just being surrounded. Thermite and Sophia move in together to plant behind bar. Goyo's stuck in vault. Goyo is in a powerful position, but what's he going to do in a 1v4? Okay, apparently a lot, because that's a 1v2 now. Like I said, the guy needs to get aggressive. I actually wouldn't mind to rotate into Study if he had decided earlier. At this point, it's too late. Because Fultz is going to know exactly where he's going to be. Holding diffuser outside during the counter diffuser is really strong. It means that you're in a position where the defender has to run out and is basically blind face checking tons of angles because it's not contained within a building. So a really good post-plant position from Fultz. I think Siege, if you want to separate the good teams from the great teams, take a note of where their post-plant positions are. All right, this time we get to watch SSG go on to the defense. So what are the teams bringing? We have the Jaeger, just the default pick, Smoke, Pulse. We've already talked about the impact of Pulse here. The Maestro and the Castle. The Castle's been brought out twice now, I think, off the top of my head. And that's in substitution for the Valkyrie. But we already have the intel in Pulse and Maestro. Maestro being passive intel versus Pulse being active intel. On DarkZero's side, a very similar lineup, except the one substitution here is the Buck instead of the Sledge. And Ash, instead of dealing with the Capitao, what else did Bosco play? Capitao, IQ, and Jackal. And as I mentioned earlier, I personally think that Ash or Capitao are probably the operators to bring in this current meta. It's not even really the meta, but just with the pool of operators that defenses have now, Ash or Capitao, based on the bans, is probably the flex operator that you want to bring. Okay, so interesting. There is an Evil Eye right here that gives you full coverage of the breach. So most teams, what they'll do is they'll eventually breach this wall. That is the laundry wall. And then try to go for a plant actually in the same spot that Maestro's in right now. But there's also a plant that some teams will do with smokes, where they will try to plant in the doorway of lamp and laundry. Anyway, this Evil Eye gives the defenders plenty of visibility into those somewhat default plants. We're seeing SSG reinforce above, just like DarkZero did. So there's going to be some kind of roam above in order to support the players downstairs. In the past, what DarkZero did is they brought a Goyo shield here. They're bringing a castle barricade. They really do somewhat do the same thing. And there's a deployable shield here, which allows a player to play behind it towards split. That splits here. And then watch any player pushing in from from trophy entrance, or statue entrance, what I should say. There's a rotation in Astro, and then the reinforcement on Astro wall. A lot of the same ideas in this setup with just different operators. And I actually didn't catch all the places where the castle barricades were used, but I would guess there's one in bathroom on the second floor. And so instead of the Goyo shield or the Vulcan shield in bathroom on the floor, there is a castle barricade, more likely than not, in the bathroom door. Oh, so there's a castle barricade on Astro window. That's opened up quite quickly. It's a pretty good trade for the defense there. A Ash charge for a castle barricade. And like I said, there is that castle barricade. Good guess. I would be really unsurprised if these two teams scrimmed against each other at some point, or have scrimmed against a team that brought this strategy out, because it is very familiar. So Zofia is marching in from the bathroom into astronomy. What she should have done is concussed the Astro stairs, and we saw that from SSG, because this was a really aggressive peak. And so I think that this push faltered just on a lack of intel. What's especially unfortunate is the fact that, Ash is right there on the Astro rappel, but she can't support the player, or she can't refrag the player, because the angle on the Astro rappel doesn't actually go deep enough. It's possible that DarkZero actually knew that there wasn't a player in Deer or Trophy, and that's because of that barricade there. If you drone out Trophy, you see the barricade, then you can safely assume that no one's going to rotate. Canadian with the C4 on the Buck. I said earlier that it's safer to use Buck than it is to use Sledge, but Canadian showing me otherwise. This is a great hole that I wish more people would do in ranked, or at least in my elo. It's a great way to cut off the flank from red, especially when you're pushing into Aviator. I realize it's not the site, but it just makes a player think twice about rotating up. So DarkZero in 2v4. They see the feet of the Maestro. This is such an interesting scenario. So you see the Maestro backing up, right? And what you would be thinking is, or I guess the call out most likely was just not that great, because Ash is ready for the player to be underneath downstairs. Maybe even logically it makes more sense for the Maestro to rotate down into the basement. Whatever. But Ash is ready for a player to be downstairs, and instead Maestro snaps onto the head of the Ash. Zofia, how much time is left? 17 seconds. So Zofia can do whatever she wants. She's most likely not going to win, and decides to drop to her death. SG just shows some funny stuff there with the Warden. We actually will revisit that later, though. DarkZero has decided that breaching is just not a possibility on Villa, and is deciding to bring the Capitao instead of the Thermite. SSG bringing Goyo, Maestro. This is a huge utility soak. All you got to do is add a Jaeger, which they did, and then add a castle, and then one more deployable shield. And it's like the defenders literally do not have enough utility to remove the defender utility, or attackers don't have enough utility to remove all that defender utility. But we have the intel with the Valkyrie and the smoke, which is kind of just the operator that you use to reshape a site. No funny business, so we'll just do the reinforcements from this aerial view. 2 reinforcements, or really 4 reinforcements in Classical Hall, your 4 reinforcements on Study, a reinforcement on the connector wall, and then Vault. Let's talk about that connector wall. The reason why you reinforce that is because of the line of sight that our attackers can get from landing entrance into bar in games. And then it also kind of works both ways. So it just denies that line of sight that an attacker would be able to get. We see Smoke is shotgunning the floor here. Earlier, DarkZero tried to thermite the wall, or thermite a small hole by thermiting the floor of Study. And so Smoke opening up these vertical lines of sight, well, it's not really a line of sight, but as much as soft destruction, is preventing the ability for DarkZero and their thermite they're not bringing to attempt to do that as well. So barbed wire on the bottom of red, barricade on trophy entrance on both sides from the Maestro there, and then most likely a 90 cam. I wonder, I don't think you can see it, but I want to talk about a evil eye that I saw Goddess do during, I believe it was invite calls. You put an evil eye on the floor towards the hatch. So the hatch is here, and then if you put the evil eye like here, let's erase this guy. It will stick on this small little piece of wood that exists once you open up the hatch. It's really powerful because there's not a way for the attackers to cleanly remove the evil eye. You need to do it in rank to understand what I'm talking about. But I thought I'd bring it to your attention as something that you can try. So what will be interesting is SSG has brought a ton of intel here. Most likely Goyo, Smoke, and Maestro sitting on site, and then Valkyrie and Jaeger roaming very flexibly, because the utility that SSG is dedicated is mostly, at least to my knowledge, on site or around site. So those two will probably be either very close to site or roaming together as a pair off-site. Ash is taking control of Brown Stairs as soon as she knows it's free. That Goyo shield actually kind of worked against the defenders there. There's not a defender in our POV that I can see, at least, that could really capitalize on Ash rushing up these Brown Stairs, right? But the fire bolts deny the ability for any defender to peek around this corner and shoot the Ash as she's running up it. So I don't really know if it's fair to say that the Goyo shield worked against the defenders, since the defenders really weren't in a position to do anything about it. But something interesting to maybe think about when you place your Goyo shields and you think about your own positioning. Buck is getting to work underneath and trying to apply pressure on. It looks like he kind of messed up, actually. He, I think, meant to do these vertical holes initially, but you know, it's not uncommon for a player to play in the position that Buck is currently looking at. So trying to get a pick there doesn't seem like it's really informed as much as just, let's see if they're creatures of habit or creatures of, you know, generally accepted strong positioning. Where Buck is bucking now is quite strong because it's behind the bar, and it's very, very common for one player to actually be on cams there. So we see Jaeger. Jaeger's on top of red stairs. I don't think he's supported by anything other than that barbed wire. So it looks like Capitao tried. Where is Capitao? How do you die like that? Oh, so Capitao was on 90 repel and thought that the other end of Classical Hall was safe, which nets the kill from the Maestro. Nice little peek there. Then trying to continue the reign of terror from this 90 position. Capitao dying there, either the player just made a really poor decision or was given really poor intel. And it would have been a really poor decision if he decided to repel in based on what he knew. So anyway, almost flawless round from SSG there. Faults got a little too aggressive. He doesn't need to maintain his position in 90, really. What is Thatcher going to have? What is Thatcher going to do? Especially with a 5, especially in a 5v1. SSG is going to go to living room and library. This is the off-site site. They're bringing Mute and Bandit. That gives the defense a lot of structure in the area that they're going to reinforce, which will more likely than not be similar to DarkZero, in that they're going to reinforce the aviator and games walls into study, despite it being above. Then Mozzie for drone denial as well as mute. The Maestro for intel, and the smoke to reshape the site in the way that they need it to be reshaped. A lot of the same thing. If it really does feel like these two have scrimmed each other quite a bit. Okay, so there are some differences. So right at the gate, we see Maestro's reinforcing this bathroom wall, and then Smoke is reinforcing this hallway. Interesting evil eye here in the hallway of the first floor. This obviously gives you tons of view into any players pushing from, well, the hallway, but also from mud. And mud is like a very direct way into sight. I'm familiar with teams calling mud rush because of how easy it is to push from that position. Cool, so quad reinforcements on the game's wall. It's really uncommon to see this kind of reinforcement structure from teams when they're playing in games when they're playing in games, and games isn't the site. But I think that this gives the players in this defensive position a lot more strength, because it disables assuming that this isn't soft. It gives the player a lot of utility in order to man that position. Some pretty major gaps. I know I've done this very loosely, but there's a pretty major gap here in terms of reinforcements. I mean, you can get an insane line of sight from the top of astronomy stairs by opening up this wall. And then if this is actually soft throughout the round, well, what I talked about with stairs and reinforcements, very much applies. So we've got the Zoe entering in from bathroom, droning herself in, while the rest of the team is pushing from the veranda into study. So this is a strong counter strategy from SSG, counter strategy being a counter entry. I doubt that Ash was droned in all the way to the top stairs here, but hey, she took the control. I'd be interested in, let's see, does Ash check whether or not the wall is soft? We don't get to actually see because of default cams, but it'd be interesting to know. So Sledge and Zofia presumably both pushing from the same side there, that is from Master, taking control, that is theirs to take, uncontested. This rotate into vault makes 90 repel extremely strong, because we'll get a player on 90 repel and then they can see into vault. But not only that, if the attackers are able to take 90, as they just did, then it's very difficult for anyone to play within games or even aviator. I've tried a lot of different strategies that use a vault rotate, but I've never seen it work for a team. It's just too much pressure for a player. It's just too powerful of a position, really. On the flip side, Canadian, it seems like, isn't droned out in aviator and is able to push the player in vault, the attacker in vault. But the defense, SSG, has forfeited vertical control and is at a 2-man disadvantage. Very unlikely that this will work out for Spacestation. Bosco needs to get aggressive here. That was a great clip with the gas canister. I really hope that Ubisoft never changes that, because it'll make Smoke just like an impossible operator to play. He's so difficult already, but would be even more so with the change. Difficult is the wrong word. Smoke is the highest skill tier, or the highest skill operator in the game right now. and I'm fine with where he is. Don't change him. Nice kill there from Fultz. Fultz, I mean, once they know that the attackers are getting diffused down, both the defenders have to get aggressive on the attackers. Retaking vertically is what you should do, because if you don't retake vertically, then you're just going to die vertically. So, nice little move from Fultz there. Bosco's trying to do his work, pushing directly into where they planted. What a nice little duck there. What a nice shot from Bosco. And just the two of them run out of time. I mean, there was 4 players to kill. Fultz rotated all the way upstairs. He's a 3 armor, so he's not going to do that very quickly. And, I mean, the two were in a bad position anyway. Trophy and statuary from SSG this time. But plenty of intel from SSG, actually like triple stacking with the Pulse, Valkyrie, and Maestro. And, you know, Canadian right now is 1 for 1 with the C4 kills playing as Pulse, so give him the operator. Same lineup from DarkZero, except this time we have Sledge, Ash, and Zofia instead of Capitao or Buck. Unless Maestro has his impacts, they're most likely not going to have any method to trick the statue master wall, so that should be a pretty easy grab for DarkZero. If Pulse, who is right now underneath, is able to time it correctly, you know, Thermite is stuck in an animation when he places down the Thermite charge, and he might be able to get a freebie in that regard. And actually, look at that. So, the Maestro carrying impact grenades, no doubt he will be trying to trick the astronomy, sorry, not the astronomy, but trying to trick the statue and master wall in order to deny the Thermite hard breach. This is a cam that I use quite a bit. It gives you a nice long line of sight into Master all the way from Deer. You actually don't even need to dedicate an Evil Eye. I think it's kind of expensive for what field of view that cam gives you. I'd recommend a deployable camera if you have a dock, for instance. It's a great cam. See how Hyper just jumped onto that couch? That's because of the concern about Pulse underneath. He's really isolated. I'd actually like... So as I mentioned with Fultz in the round 1, when Zofia crawled through the basement, you know, if they know there's a Pulse, it's pretty predictable where he's going to play in Memorial, Dining, and Kitchen. I think it would have been a good peace of mind for DarkZero to push the Pulse out if they're not already. And they can do that through the catacombs of Villa as well. Oh, that's pretty cool. So Valkyrie is just kind of in the middle of the first floor hallway in order to support Pulse if he gets pressured. And actually, it looks like, unless Valkyrie reinforced, the reinforcements go onto Laundry Wall. Opening that up if there is a player underneath is really strong because it cuts off almost the entirety of the places that a player would want to rotate to. Really, it only makes hiding behind the kitchen like stovetop safe. So DarkZero has read into the fact that there is a Pulse underneath. The Valkyrie tried jumping out or something? I'm not really sure what was that. Yeah, looks like it. Was that the same player? It was the same player. That's a mistake. That is unfortunate. It's the Thermite. The Thermite is the entry for DarkZero. So cool. I think something that people have in their mind that is completely off base is this idea of an entry operator. Like, there's definitely operators who should use their utility as quickly as possible in order to maximize their value and assist the team immediately. Those are obviously hard breachers, Thatcher, etc. But I've seen BDS use Shaiko on Habana and have him entry with a drone. I've seen Giants X-Rogue also do the same thing with, I can't remember, but it starts with an H. His name starts with an H. I'm sorry. But anyway, I wish in ranked this perception that Ash is the entry fragger, and only Ash is the entry fragger, would go away. Because actually with Goyo now, it's almost more important to have nades and the kind of lethal primary and secondary utility in order to remove the obstacles that you face once you actually hit sight. The DarkZero, they read into a freebie underneath after the Valkyrie ran out, so he's unassisted. And then they had a player drone the thermite in and kill the pulse in Memorial. That's just taking an opportunity and then, you know, capitalizing on it. Simple as that. And that is becoming more and more popular with attacks. It's trying to figure out where opportunities are and then take advantage of it. So the wall is open. Looks like Maestro was unable to successfully impact trick. Doesn't even attempt it. Based on the flash, most likely what happened is let's see if we can see how many flashbangs Thermite has. So Thermite only has one flashbang. What he probably did is he flashed over the breach in order to, let me draw it differently. He flashed over the breach, stunning and blinding the player that would be trying to impact trick on the other side. And there's no ADS. Then the player's completely blind, and well, Maestro looked like he was just kind of standing in the middle of the breach and dies to the Thermite who sees the Maestro. Sledge, despite being at the bottom of Astro Stairs almost this entire time, just now starts to peek up it. He doesn't need to aggressively do anything. He doesn't have to move up here until the post plant, because there should be a player covering the flank into bathroom. A lot of times what players will do is they'll move up these Astro Stairs and try to make a play or hold all of Astro alone. There's no need to do that. What Sledge did here was like almost flawless. Back to Aviator in games. Plenty of intel for SSG. We have the Doc as well. And the 6 to the Warden. So I will say that I have seen the defensive arrangement that SSG is going to go for. It is very much a pocket strat. So it's one of those things, you know, you try it once. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Simple as that. So what's going to happen here is Maestro is going to reinforce the hatch of Study and then place a deployable shield in that same spot. And the idea is that he watches the vault in from the balcony, while a player, I believe, watches the push from the veranda. And so before we had the smoke throwing gas canisters on Study door in order to disable them from just rushing into Study and breaching quickly. This time we have a Warden who is slowing down that same push. Oh, right, the Doc. The Doc is going to be here in this position, and he's going to try to stem the Warden in order to let the player live if he tries, or if the attackers try to nade him out, which is what's going to happen. So 2 reinforcements here, and actually there's soft destruction, horizontal soft destruction into Study. That is actually another reason. So we have a crossfire here on the top of Brown Stairs with a Doc, and then also in from Vault for attackers trying to push in through the veranda, and barbed wire there too. So really what I'm saying is pushing through this veranda isn't an option, and then trying to jump in through the balcony of Study isn't much of an option either, because of the deployable shield, more importantly the player that's in this position, which is the Warden. I don't think that there will be a crossfire from the top of red, but actually let's go back and show this all. But if there was, this just makes pushing or jumping in from the balcony, this east side, or I guess this is actually, east side of the outside of Villa, all the more difficult, because, well, 2 guns pointed at one person is better than 1 gun pointed at one person. These 2 reinforcements, I don't really understand the complete reason. It's maybe because I haven't really played around with what they're doing here, but it's maybe because you get angles in from or outside from the balcony into games, and that would be a reason why you'd want to reinforce those two walls. And again, that's because SSG are leaving this entire wall soft. Big fans of the barricades, both sides, which is interesting because a lot of times I think the barricades are underused, but also it's not uncommon for them to hurt the defenders trying to rotate back. When you have a defensive setup though that is very locked in towards sight, it makes a lot of sense because you get the notification audibly of a player punching it. What it also would tell me as an attacker though is, hey, there's tons of map control that they've boarded off that we can take for free, and we should. So DarkZero are taking, oh man, this is so unfortunate. DarkZero remove this warden so quickly. It's 2 minutes into the round, and what they've decided to do is, I believe they've zoffed the floor here, or maybe it's an Astrar, it doesn't really matter. But they're nading through this vertical soft destruction into the player's position and studying this corner. Actually, if Warden moves into the corner here, he saves himself from dying from the nade, but I'm pretty sure the sledge has a line of sight onto the Warden moving into that position, so he's most likely a goner no matter what. Again, this is a pocket strat. The player, the Warden here, is really a form of bait, so it's just unfortunate that they took out one of their better performing players on the day in Rampy. And maybe Fultz could have overstemmed him in order to help him out in that position. Canadian's somewhat roaming off site. I mean, he's just holding control of red, and he's again using those barricades. DarkZero, because, as I mentioned before, because they're moving through study and they're not taking the map control in the back from astronomy and master, they're really moving into somewhat of this counter-strat, but they've been able to handle it flawlessly up to this point. I mean, one player dead in a position that was supposed to be super difficult to remove is a really strong position for an attacking team. And we see this Maestro. I think the Maestro probably didn't or wasn't supposed to bring the impact grenades unless they were worried that DarkZero would thermite the vault wall. You can impact the drone hole of 90, and that will disable or remove the thermite charge if they try to breach into 90. So Jaeger's on red stairs right now. We'll see how helpful that really is. I mean, he has barricades in the back in order to inform whether they're pushing from there. They're not. But right now, based on the attack positions, probably not super helpful. Upside down rappel there on the veranda, able to get a deeper line of sight, more advantageous line of sight onto a player who is crouched behind a shield. Just a good use of a mechanic that exists in the game. And so Sledge, so the issue with this very creative setup from SSG is now that they've just lost the player in Vault, DarkZero, or rather SSG, has done the work for DarkZero in breaching the study into aviator wall that they would have otherwise probably spent all around trying to get into, especially with Maestro having impact grenades. So that's just a ton of pressure into sight. There's no reason, as we're seeing right now, for DarkZero not to be able to go for the plant in aviator. And everything just very quickly collapses. I actually think, so they reinforce this wall, right? Most likely because of the lines of sight you can get from the balcony on this east end, out here and to here. And so Smoke knows that they're most likely, or from scrims most likely knows that they're going to plant in this position on the reinforced wall. Clips the smoke, great. They have a player holding the maps door into study, and that would contest the Jaeger on top of red from peeking the player planting on this reinforced wall.
I mean, it's like Bosco did everything right. Jaeger probably did everything right. It's just once the Maestro dies in sight, everything falls apart because of the setup. All right, last round, we're on to dining and kitchen. Lots of the same faces, tons of intel from SSG. We'll see if it works, Probably going to be the same strategy that we saw earlier from SSG. We already see that Maestro's putting the same evil eye. The rotation from Memorial into dining. Is this dining? I think it's dining. Is one that I'm pretty fond of. There's this arch here, and the wall jets out just enough that it doesn't give attackers a great line of sight. And there's also this, I don't know what this is, but this is clearly just there to obstruct, again, the deep line of sight that attackers might be able to get. So I recommend it. Big fan. Because SSG are moving so directly above sight, I think Canadian's going to net a C4 kill. Actually, I say this all guessingly, but I'm pretty sure he does because he gets 2 C4 kills, and I think I've only seen 1 so far during this VOD review. But yeah, so that's one of the threats of hitting above sight so quickly with a pulse on the table. It means that it's just easier for Pulse to get the kill. So interesting. We just saw DarkZero has relayed information that there is no one in Deer, that is barricaded off. There is no one in Astro, and there's one player on the triple wall of Master. It'd be really interesting for us to watch how DarkZero now pushes SSG out. So Maestro, I don't know why Maestro just rotated down. Did Ash flash? Ash did flash. So look at this adaptation. Everything is changing here, right? Ash flashes down onto Astro stairs, causing Maestro to rotate off. That means that no longer Zofia needs to worry about Astro stairs. So let's watch as he approaches inside Astro. He's really widening into Astro there. He's not really concerned at all about Astro stairs. Canadian does net a kill onto Mint, most likely somewhere in Master, and then that's the Pulse, the C4. But what I'm waiting for in the kill feed right now is for the kill onto Jaeger from Hyper, and that's what we just saw. That was really freaking well done by DarkZero, and I will just say right now that if I hadn't given it up to my viewers' vote, it would have been DarkZero that I would have done the season review on, because that kind of stuff, being able to adapt like that in game, is so cool to me, and something that DarkZero does so often. Castle Memorial, we have 2 players in dining, and they're comfortable there because the pantry wall has not yet, or the laundry wall has not yet been opened. That was unfortunate. We just see the heartbeat of the Ash pushing the Pulse there from the basement. She's going to go all the way up and take control of pantry now. Maestro is chasing this 3-speed down through the catacombs. Again, this is what you expect out of a player who is in a man disadvantage with the time left and lack of control on site. I don't know where Thermite is planting right now, but I'm guessing they breached something, because otherwise this play from Rampy's may be the wrong play. But so Rampy is trying to come up behind the Ash and get somewhat of a freebie here. I think he actually does get the kill. Nice, very nice. Unfortunate that meanwhile it's a 2v2, but still better than a 3v4. But as I said earlier, the mark of a great team is a more complex post plant. And with Skies all the way on top of Astro stairs, it's very difficult for these 2 defenders to win this, if not impossible. Didn't happen this time, at least. So that's the game. Playday number 1 done for SSG. Turns out to be a loss. I wanted to in addition to the VOD review, accompany this with some statistics, because that is the role of an analyst. And in VOD reviewing, it is kind of the position that an analyst would otherwise take. So here I have all the raw data. I should mention I missed one of our players' deaths when I compared it to the information that siege.gg had on this match. I'm going to guess that I'm wrong, but it's not really worth me going through again and checking, frankly, since this is really more just kind of a way for a viewer to glean information on, like, what the hell does an analyst do? On the second sheet of the spreadsheet, you'll see here play day 1, DZ at Villa. What I did is I took fields that I personally think are very interesting to me as a coach, as an analyst, as a viewer, etc., and then broke those down into or created, first some pretty little charts here to see opening kills, opening deaths, but for us to actually be able to quantify the things that we talk about. So something that is really interesting is Rampy had no nade kills despite a 100% sledge pick rate. That's a bit concerning. Canadian had 2 C4 kills as Pulse, which is a really good conversion rate of 66%, given that his cardiac sensor is meant to net those C4 kills. Thinking Nade had 0 defending kills, so they need to think about the position that he's playing in and how to support that, or whether it needs to be changed, whatever. Likewise, Bosco, he boasts this huge number of 7 kills with disadvantage, and at the same time, his defending, winning kills over losing deaths is 0.25. So that to me says that the roamers need to do more work so that the anchors don't have to do so much work, and Bosco's not put in such terrible positions. And then lastly, this kind of goes back with that zero KDR on defense for Thinking Nade, but Thinking Nade has a 0.33 percentage where he's dying when the team has an advantage, a man advantage, meaning that he's either over peaking or out of position. So that's kind of statistical data that I would be interested in collecting. I'm sure that there's other opinions on this, but I wanted to bring this out of the shadows because in the past it has been really kind of kept secret as, like, this is, I don't know, it's just like a nebulous thing in the Siege community for some reason. Just remember that statistics, don't always say the whole story. For instance, Rampy sitting in the corner of Study as Warden is obviously a very designed strat, but him dying in that position and not netting a kill isn't really his fault, because the strategy calls for him to play in that position, and it's really the strength of DarkZero being able to read into the problem that they were faced with and having a solution so quickly and elegant to remove the Warden in that spot. So don't get too wrapped up in stats, but stats are a way for us to have a conversation and reinforce ideas so that it's not completely emotional and, well, I think, this player does X, Y, Z well, but doesn't do Q, whatever, well. Fell into a trance watching the game at 2 speed, but I will conclude with my usual take care.